Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am Dr. Isma and we shall be discussing the control of ECF osmolarity and sodium concentration. The regulation of the extracellular fluid osmolarity and sodium concentration are very closely linked because sodium is the most abundant ion in the extracellular compartment. Normal plasma sodium concentration is maintained between 140 to 145 milliequivalents per liter with an average concentration of 142 milliequivalents per liter. The average plasma osmolarity is about 300 milliosmoles per liter, and if you correct it for interionic attractions, then it is about 282 milliequivalents per liter. ECF osmolarity and sodium concentration must be precisely controlled because they determine the distribution of fluid between the intracellular fluid and the extracellular fluid. The reason why plasma osmolarity can be estimated from plasma sodium concentration is that sodium ions and its associated ions, anions, primarily bicarbonate and chloride, make about 94% of the extracellular osmoles, with glucose and urea only contributing to about 3 to 5% of the total osmoles. So plasma osmolarity can be roughly calculated as 2 times the plasma sodium concentration, which is around 298 milliosmoles per liter and making about 300 milliosmoles per liter. And because urea easily permeates most of the cell membrane, it exerts little effective osmotic pressure under normal conditions. Therefore, sodium ion in the extracellular fluid and associated anions are the principal determinants of the fluid movement across the cell membrane. The figure over here shows the osmoreceptor ADH feedback system, and this mechanism is important for regulation of extracellular fluid osmolarity in response to water deficit. As you can see that whenever there is an increase in the extracellular fluid osmolarity, which means practically the same as increase in the plasma sodium concentration, it leads to the special nerve cells which are called osmoreceptors, which are located in the anterior hypothalamus near the supraoptic nucleus, to shrink. Shrinkage of these osmoreceptor cells causes them to fire, sending nerve signals to additional nerve cells in the supraoptic nuclei, which then relay these signals down to the stalk of the pituitary to the posterior pituitary. These action potentials conducted to the posterior pituitary then stimulate the release of ADH, which is stored in secretory granules or vesicles in the nerve endings. ADH enters the bloodstream and is transported to the kidneys, where it increases the water permeability of the late distal tubules, the cortical collecting tubules, and the medullary collecting ducts. The increased water permeability in the distal nephron segments then causes increased water reabsorption and excretion of small volume of concentrated urine, thereby conserving water in the body, while sodium and other solutes will be continued to be excreted in the urine. This causes dilution of solutes in the extracellular fluid, hence correcting the initial excessively concentrated extracellular fluid. Also note that the opposite events will occur in case of hypoosmotic condition in the ECF. The hypothalamus contains two types of large or magnocellular neurons, and these synthesize ADH, and the first one is the supraoptic nucleus and the second one is the paraventricular nucleus, and supraoptic nucleus synthesizes about 5/6 of the ADH, while the paraventricular nucleus synthesizes about 1/6 of the ADH, and both these neurons have axonal extensions which go all the way to the posterior pituitary, and once ADH is synthesized, it is transported down the axons of the neurons to their tips and terminating in the posterior pituitary gland. When the supraoptic and the paraventricular nuclei are stimulated, then the nerve impulses pass down these neurons, increase the entry of calcium and cause the secretion of ADH from the stored vesicles, and then the ADH enters into the systemic circulation. Another area in the region of the third ventricle is known as the AV3V region. At the upper part of this region is an organ called subphonical organ, and at the inferior portion is an organ which is known as organum vasculosum of lamina terminalis, and in the middle of these two organs is median preoptic nucleus. This nucleus has nerve connections with both the superior and the inferior organs, and also with the supraoptic nuclei, as well as with the blood pressure control centers in the medulla of the brain. Whenever there is a lesion of the AV3V region, it will lead to multiple deficits in the control of the ADH secretion, the thirst, and the sodium appetite. Both the subphonical organ and the organum vasculosum of lamina terminalis basically lie outside of the blood-brain barrier. Hence, the osmoreceptors rapidly respond to changes in osmolarity of the extracellular fluid, exerting powerful control over the secretion of ADH and over thirst. ADH release is also controlled by cardiovascular reflexes, which respond to decreases in blood pressure or blood volume. These reflexes include the arterial baroreceptor reflex and number 2, the cardiopulmonary reflexes. These reflex pathways originate in high pressure regions of the circulation like the aortic arch and the carotid sinus, and in low pressure regions, especially the cardiac atrium. Afferent stimuli are carried by vagus and glossopharyngeal nerves with synapses in the nucleus of the tractus solitarius. Projection of these nuclei relay signals to the hypothalamic nuclei that control ADH synthesis and secretion. So, in addition to increased osmolarity, two other stimuli also increase ADH secretion, which is number 1, decreased arterial pressure, and number 2, decreased blood volume. Whenever the blood pressure and the blood volume are reduced, for example during hemorrhage, increased ADH secretion causes increased fluid reabsorption by the kidneys, helping to restore the blood pressure and blood volume back towards normal. This is a table showing factors other than plasma, increased plasma osmolarity and decreased blood volume and blood pressure, which lead to increased ADH secretion. For example, nausea, hypoxia, and drugs like morphine, nicotine, and cyclophosphamide all increase ADH secretion. Also, you can see the factors which decrease ADH secretion, and they are decreased plasma osmolarity, increased blood volume, increased blood pressure, alcohol, clonidine, which is an antihypertensive drug, and haloperidol, which is dopamine blocker. And the marked diuresis which occurs after ingestion of alcohol is partly because of its inhibition of ADH release. Thirst is defined as a conscious desire for water. Fluid intake is regulated by thirst mechanism, and many of the same factors which stimulate ADH secretion also increase thirst. The increased extracellular fluid osmolarity, which causes increased intracellular dehydration in the thirst centers, stimulates the sensation of thirst. This is important because it helps to dilute the extracellular fluids and returns the osmolarity back towards normal. Decreases in the extracellular fluid volume and arterial pressure also stimulate thirst by pathways which are different from the one that is stimulated by increased plasma osmolarity. So, blood volume loss by hemorrhage stimulates thirst even though there might be no change in plasma osmolarity. And this is basically through neural inputs from the cardiopulmonary and the systemic arterial baroreceptors in the circulation. Another important stimulus for thirst is angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 acts on subphonical organ and on organum vasculosum of lamina terminalis, and these regions are outside the blood-brain barrier. And peptides like angiotensin 2 diffuse into the tissues. Because angiotensin 2 is also stimulated by factors which are associated with hypovolemia and low blood pressure, its effect on thirst helps to restore the blood volume and blood pressure towards normal. Dryness of mouth and mucosal membranes of the esophagus can elicit sensation of thirst. As a result, a thirsty person may receive relief from thirst almost immediately after drinking water, even though the water has not been absorbed from the GIT and has not yet had an effect on the extracellular fluid osmolarity. Gastrointestinal and pharyngeal stimuli influence thirst. Also, gastrointestinal distension may partially alleviate thirst. For instance, simply inflation of a balloon in the stomach can relieve thirst. However, relief of thirst sensation through gastrointestinal or pharyngeal mechanism is short-lived, and the desire to drink is completely satisfied only when the plasma osmolarity and blood volume return back towards normal. There is something known as the ability to meter fluid intake, and this is important because it prevents overhydration. After a person drinks water, 30 to 60 minutes may be required for water to be reabsorbed and distributed throughout the body. If the thirst sensation were not temporarily relieved after drinking water, the person would continue to drink more and more water, eventually leading to overhydration and excess dilution of the body fluids. The thirst centers in the CNS are the antroventral wall of the third ventricle, which is known as the AV3V region. Along with ADH secretion, it also stimulates thirst. Then you have located anterolaterally in the preoptic nucleus is another area which, when electrically stimulated, causes drinking of water as long as the stimulation lasts. And also organum vasculosum of lamina terminalis, which lies outside the brain barrier, are is also included in the thirst centers. And the stimuli for thirst we have already discussed. It is just written down here for your ease. When the sodium concentration increases to only about 2 milliequivalents per liter above normal, the thirst mechanism is activated and it leads to a desire to drink water, and this is known as the threshold for drinking. Thus, even a small increase in plasma osmolarity is normally followed by water intake, which restores the extracellular fluid osmolarity and volume back towards normal. In this way, the extracellular fluid osmolarity and sodium concentration are precisely controlled. The figure on the left shows the integrated response of osmoreceptor ADH and thirst mechanism in controlling the extracellular fluid osmolarity and sodium concentration. These systems work in parallel to control the extracellular fluid osmolarity and sodium concentration. And when both these systems are functional, even large increases in salt intake will keep the plasma osmolarity at relatively constant levels. However, when either the ADH or the thirst mechanisms fail, the other can still control the ECF osmolarity and sodium concentration as long as there is enough fluid to balance the daily obligatory urine volume and water losses which are caused by respiration, sweating and GI losses. But if both ADH and thirst mechanisms fail together, plasma sodium concentration and osmolarity will be poorly controlled. So, when sodium intake is increased after blocking the total ADH thirst system, large changes in plasma sodium concentrations occur. In the absence of ADH thirst mechanism, there is no other feedback mechanism which is capable of adequately regulating the plasma sodium concentration and osmolarity. The figure on the right shows the that the relative unimportance of aldosterone in regulating the extracellular fluid concentration. As you know that two hormones, angiotensin 2 and aldosterone, are associated with regulation of sodium reabsorption by the renal tubules. When sodium intake is low, increased level of these hormones stimulate sodium reabsorption and prevent large sodium losses. And on the other hand, when high sodium intake occurs, decreased formation of these hormones permit the kidneys to excrete large amounts of sodium. Because of the importance of angiotensin 2 and aldosterone in regulating the sodium excretion by the kidneys, one might mistakenly think that they also play an important role in regulating the extracellular fluid sodium concentration. However, these hormones increase the amount of sodium in the extracellular fluid. They also increase the extracellular fluid volume by increasing reabsorption of water along with sodium. So, angiotensin 2 and aldosterone have little net effect on sodium concentration except under extreme conditions. And there are two reasons why angiotensin 2 and aldosterone do not have a major effect on the plasma sodium concentration. First of all, whenever the angiotensin 2 and aldosterone levels increase, both the sodium and water reabsorption occurs by the tubules, leading to increase in the extracellular fluid volume and sodium quantity, but little change in the sodium concentration. And as long as number 2, the 88 thirst mechanism is functional, any tendency towards increased plasma sodium concentration is compensated by an increased water intake or increased plasma 88 secretion, which tends to dilute the extracellular fluid back towards normal. So the ADH thirst system overshadows the angiotensin 2 and aldosterone system for regulating sodium concentration under the normal conditions. And in patients with primary aldosteronism who have extremely high levels of aldosterone, the plasma sodium concentration usually increases only to about 3 to 5 milliequivalents above normal. In cases of total lack of aldosterone, which occurs in case of Addison's disease or adrenalectomy, there will be increased loss of sodium and decrease in plasma sodium concentration. This leads to volume depletion and a decrease in the blood pressure, which stimulates the baroreceptor reflexes, which will increase the thirst, leading to further dilution of the plasma sodium concentration. This is a condition which, in spite of normal ADH thirst mechanism, the plasma sodium concentration changes markedly. Salt appetite mechanism for controlling ECF sodium concentration and volume. The maintenance of the normal extracellular fluid volume and sodium concentration requires a balance between sodium excretion and sodium intake. The normal sodium intake is about 100 to 200 milliequivalents per day, but the minimum required is 10 to 20 milliequivalents per day. The same areas that cause thirst stimulation also are responsible for salt appetite, which is the AV3V regions, and circulatory reflexes elicited by a decreased blood volume or a decreased blood pressure also lead to increased salt appetite. So whenever there is decreased ECF sodium concentration, it will lead to an increased salt appetite, and this is in general the primary stimuli will be the decreased blood volume, decreased blood pressure associated with circulatory insufficiency.